everybody. We are live. It's the Plant-Based Business Hour. Thanks for being with me. I'm Elysabeth Alfano. Let's get into the numbers, shall we? Plant-based milk is a $2 billion category. Plant-based milk represents 40% of the entire plant-based food market. Plant-based milk is 14% of the milk category. Nobody can talk about this better than the co-founder of Califia Farms. Greg Steltenpohl is here with me. I'm so happy to have you here with me, Greg. Thanks for doing this.
Great to be on with you too, Elizabeth. It's exciting.
It is very exciting. I just want to show people a graphic before I really get into your numbers and details. Just look at this, folks. I get this from the Good Food Institute. If you look at the top company, it's Blue Diamond. They were established in 1910. Right on their heels, you have Califia Farms 2010. So with a 100-year start, you are so close to really outpacing, hopefully, Blue Diamond at some point. So very exciting times for Califia Farms. Before I get into where the milk market is headed, let me ask you, because you have yogurt, you have coffee, and of course you have milk, do you see yourself as a plant-based milk company, as a plant-based dairy company, or just as a beverage company as a whole?
Well, we actually think about ourselves as a plant-based health and wellness company. And that's the way we've always conceptualized the brand potential for Califia. And maybe it's a bad analogy, but milks and the alternative that plant-based milks represented was kind of like a gateway drug into people being much more adventuresome across that whole, what used to be called the dairy case. Or even today, some people use plant-based dairy. So the word dairy is coming to mean more like just these usage occasions rather than something that came directly from a cow. So super interesting times, but no, we look at it in a very broad, spectrum.
Yeah, and you've had some very interesting plant-based dairy launches of late that we're going to get into. But before I switch over to butter, which, oh, hey, spoiler alert, it's coming your way, folks, if you don't have it already, and I'll be eating some on this show. I talked about 14% of the milk sales are plant-based. That's already very disruptive. What do you see happening in the future? Is there more disruption to take place?
Well, for sure. I think all of us got disrupted by COVID, so we can just set that as an equalizer across any kind of industry. And I think for those of us that have been trying to manage any sort of food operation at scale, COVID was tough for everybody to keep up, to connect all the supply chains, to redirect the supply chains that were serving food service, which almost completely got shut down and still is really suffering at less than half of what it was before. And then adapting all those food distribution systems to serve primarily grocery type channels where the consumer and people have, if you think about the volume of food that was consumed while people were traveling, or restaurants, hotels, resorts, schools, it's now all has to go through that home channel. So during that period of time, there was also a lot of emotional pressure on families and people. So I think there was a comfort food, I don't want to call it a relapse, but let's just say, people defaulted to things that maybe they were easier to make, they knew how to do it, and so on. But now, in what I would call the later COVID period, we're seeing a lot of exploration again. We're seeing a lot of people also, their waistlines got a little bigger during COVID.
Yeah, the COVID-19.
Yes, COVID-19, COVID-20, whatever we call it, has had an impact on a lot of people's health. So health clubs have suffered. People, and when I say people, we're just talking about statistically in mass. There's obviously a lot of people love to run. They were still comfortable going outdoors. But by and large, I think there has been, so sorry. By and large, there's been a very challenging period for people to go through a transition with their diet, and also just how to cook for your family or how to come up with the right recipes.
Well, as you say, it has been such an interesting time. And my understanding, I get some of these stats from the Plant-Based Food Association, that plant-based foods have been up the quarter, I think the second quarter from March to June over 2020 over 2019, they were up significantly. I want to say in the 200 kind of percent area, and oat milk specifically. And of course, Califia has an oat milk that this is empty now because I drank it all, but oat milk has done very well. And so as you say, yes, a lot of comfort foods that people know and they rely on, but at the same time, I think people are doubting where their meat comes from. Wet markets, slaughterhouses, et cetera. They're putting that into question. And then dairy already has such a tailwind because 65% of Americans are lactose intolerant, and that's much higher in the African American and the Asian American communities. So I think plant milks have done very well in COVID. Do I have that wrong?
Well, plant milks have done extremely well because for multiple reasons. One, Califia has a dual type of packaging. So we have both a shelf-stable pantry filling pack, which is primarily originally been sold through food service channels like small cafes and restaurants where they don't have a lot of storage space. So they need that shelf-stable, non-refrigerated capability. But then the rest of the products have allowed people to explore choices that maybe they didn't have before. And a lot of what Califia has tried to pioneer is the thing called personalization, which is taking what people learn to do at a Starbucks, which is order the, double low-fat latte with, extra cream and sprinkles on, the whole 9 yards, which was a way of personalizing the way they particularly like their cup of coffee. Well, now, without people being able to en masse go to a Starbucks or a specialty, they're trying to bring that moment or that little bit of customization back into the home and have that freedom or just fun of customizing things. So we make coffee concentrates, we make creamers, we make we have multi-serves that allow you to have a strength of coffee, some of it pre-mixed and some of it just you mix the milk the way you want it. So that whole idea of kind of bringing the coffee experience or morning beverage experience into your own fridge and into your own purview is a big part of the way we've thought about it. And sorry, Elizabeth, I just wanted to say that a huge part of my passion has been to not think about things as, just try to be like dairy, but just bring new energy, new excitement into the way people think about taking care of their health. It's just like taking care of your health is not a burden. It shouldn't be thought of and create, anorexia and all these other problems that come psychologically from thinking that we have to be a certain way. I think that just having the joy of exploration, where our best-selling products also happen to be products that are in the 40 to 60 calorie per serving range versus highly indulgent dairy products, for example, that are in the 120 to 160 range. So those are, those are ones without a lot of added sugar. Those are ones just with the basic raw material of the cream or of the milk. So I think just looking at things creatively is a big part of Califia's success.
Mm-hmm.
Variety, choice, and day part, and just new things that haven't been tried.
And that's why I wanted to throw up these graphics from your website. And this is just some of the products. Obviously, there's many more, but you can see everybody who's watching, at least on the live. And if you're on the podcast, you just go to califiafarms.com. You see how many latte versions you have and how you do have all these cold brew coffees, and you can mix them with your oat creamer, or that oat creamer can be a barista type, or it can have protein added to it, which is the creamer that I have here that I've been using that is all out. It already has, oat and protein in it. And then something that I drink, you've made me a cold brew person in the afternoon. I drink the cold brew that is already having some of the milk in it, the oat milk in it. So I can see where creativity is really something that you've been exploring. And you do have butters and you have yogurts, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I also think you've hit on something just generally that COVID has given another tailwind to. So plant-based dairy in general, I'll say, has that tailwind of people being lactose intolerant. But I think COVID has really made people focus in on their health and question their food supply. Where is their food coming from? And so I'm not surprised when you tell me that people are focusing on the beverages that don't have the added sugar or are 40 to 60 calories, because I think you're going to see a lot more focus on the healthy vegan products that are still convenient for people. So a lot of people still don't have time to cook. COVID gave people a little time to cook. I don't know if that will last. I certainly hope it does. But I think that focus on health and healthy products is here to stay. You're probably seeing that in your numbers.
Yeah, well, it's definitely confirmed. I mean, first of all, we can look at Asia and many countries that recovered from COVID earlier as a kind of bellwether for what is to come here in the U.S. Eventually, hopefully we get out of our COVID environment. But I think there's a lot of hope there. But what is very clear, in addition to people shifting to a lot of online purchasing, what comes along with online purchasing is a lot more freedom to explore many different options, as opposed to just the options that the intermediary of the retailer has brought before them. So many challenges for smaller brands breaking into the market in the US is that, supermarkets even have limited the choices post-COVID. They've narrowed things down because of all the logistics challenges. So I am hugely excited. We've had something, at this point, it's like a 300 to 400% increase in our e-commerce business as a result of people investigating, being able to research what the best products are and then making those choices themselves, rather than have the grocery buyer be an intermediary. So I think it bodes extremely well for the industry. And if you look at the indications in China, for example, which is, probably at least 6 to 9 months ahead of us relative to a post, COVID recovery environment, you're seeing a huge uptick in demand for plant-based foods.
Yes, and this makes so much sense for China. It's completely another show, but I'll just give people a little bit of tidbit to nibble on. So if you are in trade negotiations with someone that you might consider irrational, it's best to lock down your own food supply source so that you don't have to rely on that trading partner for food. So I see China is getting very heavily into plant-based and having more control over their food supply, as well as having more control over their health numbers. All you need to do is look at how much money America spends on its health issues, and you realize that you don't want to go down that path. So I can see China shifting over it very quickly. And when you're talking about 1.4 trillion people, billion people, potentially switching over, you're talking about really a market that shifts the world. It's so very exciting. Well, one of the things that has always impressed me about Califia is that you are a large company. As we said, you're the second in plant-based milks, just right behind Diamond, but yet you remain quite nimble. So you do have a lot of personalized products, and I do want to bring out this product. So I've been really getting into this, which has been very fun for me. Your butters and of course yogurt. So let's talk about more than just plant-based milks. Why did you decide to get into butter? And you have two kinds. You have olive oil and avocado oil. So why did you head into butter?
Well, first of all, in setting up a brand, and this is just a lot of times in these conversations, I try to just figure out who in the audience might be a budding entrepreneur and give some encouragement, So one of the things that we did when we were dreaming up the brand and thinking about it is just how to build something that had a lot of different principles incorporated. One was built to last, multi-generational brand. And then secondly, a brand obviously that was exclusively plant-based. So that's very different, not to correct you, Elizabeth, but we're not actually the second largest in plant-based in the United States, because Danone, which is a very large global dairy, owns a number of other brands, many of whom have plant-based offerings. So collectively, we're probably the third largest in North America. But that does bring up this point that you mentioned innovation and creativity several times, and as a differentiator, by having a limitation and a focus, it makes you be more creative because you aren't going to just go off and do these obvious other things that give you a bunch of volume. So I really like the discipline of being a vegan company and being, in that channel, and your wings can be actually very wide if you look at that dairy case, so-called, and say, where could we replace other things and make it different and better? Not just copy, but actually raise the bar on texture, on flavor, on variety, on usage occasions, on packaging, So that's the way we looked at it. So butter is our first culinary effort. So that's a big deal for us. And
it's so super good, I do have to say.
But I got to tell you a funny story. So at first we thought, well, this is really just a natural foods play. We'll go to Whole Foods, obviously. We'll go to Sprouts and all the other big customers that serve the natural food community. But we have a young woman who was running our Kroger business, went to Kroger, baked up a bunch of chocolate chip cookies with the butter, and won the guy was so impressed. He goes, okay, I've been hit with a lot of other butter. I'm going to make them all bake a chocolate chip cookie and see if yours still tastes the best. And that's how we won the business. So we can seriously vouch that this is a trustable substitute in almost any culinary application. And a couple other things. Safety. One of the things that has been a shortcoming of other plant-based butters is that when you try to fry them at high heat, they splatter. And if any of you have ever been in a kitchen when, a young child comes in unexpectedly and, if something splatters, there's hot oil running around. So we were very conscious to try to make sure this was splatter-free, which it is. And then the other thing is, how does the product hold together at typical home cooking conditions? And one of the things was countertop stability. So some plant butters just melt into a kind of pool of liquid at normal, 75 degree, or if you don't have AC in the LA or something, it can be 80 degrees in your kitchen.
Yes, right.
So that's something that we're really proud of. And this is an example of how to extend, like butter, you cannot really cook at high heat because it burns and browns. Right. Whereas our plant butter, you can feel free to cook. So if you like something a little more seared, this actually is a superior product in performance.
Well, I think you've really hit on something, and Ethan Brown talks about this as well. He's been on the show. Plant-based foods for a while, they were trying to just be like the analog products. But now really, there's not much you can do with meat. Meat is meat. There's not much you can do with cow's milk. It is what it is. But here, we really have the opportunity to continue to make these products so much better than their comparative products. So it's really an exciting time, not just because of the growth numbers, but because of the creativity, I think.
Well, that's another reason of encouragement, to others, is that I think, bringing, first of all, food is emotional to people, and food brings people together. And not to keep referring to COVID, but we are in the middle of something that has never happened in our society for such a length of time and such a scale before. So families are spending way more time together than they ever did. And cooking together you have to look no further than French culture or Italian culture to realize how those cultures really had a lot of strength from how they passed traditions on from one generation to another. So I view that there's a silver lining, or you have to look for them for sure. And the other thing is that bringing multi-generational ideas together. So for example, let's say a young vegan senior in high school was going to go to college, but now spends an extra year with the family. She's a radical vegan, right? Well, now mom and dad are going to get exposed to lots more conversations, probably lots more education, and lots more cooking adventures between them, where maybe they say, wow, I didn't know we could have incredible vegan pancakes, incredible chocolate chip cookies, so I just view that there's some interesting side effects and relative to tipping points of, dairy decline, maybe instead of 2% to 4% a year, maybe all of a sudden with all this awareness building and multi-generational talk, that we start to get to a 5-6% decline per year, which would save the lives of a lot of cows.
Absolutely. And I think what you say is very true, that this is really, I'm paraphrasing here what you're saying, this is sort of the time of the informed consumer. I think COVID has really left open a lot of doors, not just that people are curious and doubting where their food comes from, but they are spending more time in the kitchen. As you say, they're spending more time talking with their family members about what to buy, what to order, have it delivered to your house, what's coming to you personally, what do you want, what things do you want for your health, what do you want for the planet. These kind of conversations, I think, are taking place because in a way we've shifted our time. So you're not stuck in traffic, but you're home with your family members. And these kind of decisions are changing.
Right. I think that one of the things around generational shifting, it's bigger than I think people estimate. I think that if you look at the average consumption of plant-based milk between the over 40 age group and the under 40 age group, it's more than double. So in fact, it's completely inverse. So if you look at the generalized numbers, under 40, people are consuming on average, 60% of them are regular consumers of a plant-based milk. In the over 50 crowd, you are somewhere in the range of around 35% to 40%. And if you go in the over 60 crowd, you're down around 25%. So look at this shift from who was making up the baby boomers who are now turning over 60, who were making up the largest part of the population, were consuming the least amount of plant-based milks. Now, all of a sudden, the largest bulge of the population is consuming 60%, on average. So we're headed, and we don't know whether it's the start of that really huge shift is next year or this year or the year after, but it's for sure coming. It's undeniable.
Yes, and you're talking about under 40 being the big number, but you can even divide that into millennials and then Generation Z, and it even grow. The younger you get, the more it grows. So
exactly.
very exciting time. Yes, and you are continuing to create products for those people who are thinking out of the box and doing other things than what their parents and their grandparents did. So just a wonderful time for, again, the informed consumer who cares. And we talk about this a lot on this show. It might be frustrating. You watch politics to the left or to the right. It doesn't even matter which side you're on. It is a very frustrating time. And so if you're feeling that you're out of control, you do have control. You have control about where you spend your dollars. And when you spend your dollars to align with your values, what you want for your family in the future, what you want for the environment in the future, what you want for animals, when you spend your dollars to align with those values, you are going to see a change. And that's what we're living through right now. It's actually, silver lining, as you talk about, it's a very exciting time to be alive.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. I'm 1,000% in agreement. I saw a very hopeful article from a longtime ecologist today that described the hope for the planet in that the generation that is coming up is just not willing to tolerate policies that do not think about the continuity and quality of life for all beings on the planet, but also just even for human, multi-generations of humans. So their grandchildren. And do we want, our grandchildren or their grandchildren living in a world of constant mega storms, right, like crowded bread lines just for basic food from the government? I mean, these are things images that belonged, back in the days that we thought would never come again. Mm-hmm. And now somehow, my own generation, which I feel has not done enough, but the generations who have control of the economy have not prioritized future generations well enough. And, I think Greta and the whole movement that she's helped stimulate of that generation of activists is on point 100%. Mm-hmm. And that, the support of brands like Califia is in large part because of, their foresight. So I think it's our duty as elders to and I'm not including you, Elizabeth, in that.
Thank you. Thank you. Don't be calling me an elder. Hold on here, folks.
I'm talking for my generation, to listen harder and do more and be activists in business, because that's where we are in our stage of life. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think Califia is trying to do.
So I would go one step further. I would say younger generations are sick of it. They won't tolerate it. And I challenge companies to step up to the plate, because you are a big part of switching over your distribution lines to plant-based milks and plant-based foods. And quite frankly, if you don't see the dollars there, you are way behind the 8 ball. So for your stockholders, for the future of the planet, for your grandkids, get with the program, because nobody has tolerance for this anymore, and we don't have time. And our patience we're done here, because meat-borne pandemics come from eating meat, and we've all been slightly inconvenienced here. And so let's get in front of this rather than behind it. No more patience. That's my philosophy. I'm sticking to it. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to it, Elizabeth. I mean, if I could build on this just a little bit?
Please.
I mean, there are things like in the butter, for example, and you're not just in your encouragement for big food and food companies of all types to get into plant-based because it's the right thing to do. But many times when they get in, they look for shortcuts. And one of the reasons our butter is not the cheapest butter on the market is because we don't use any palm oil. And
thank you for that.
Just like why is rainforest deforestation in Brazil related to the beef industry and the growth of cheap hamburger in the United States, but also palm oil and palm plantations, have been a big part of rainforest type destruction in Indonesia in particular. And these are very biodiverse areas.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about the principles behind plant-based eating, it is not just to save the life of a cow from, kind of being part of a brutal mechanical system that's, really not made for a living thing to be a part of.
Right.
Not just that, but it is about the diversity and the consciousness around how the world is so connected.
Yes.
Many ecologists speak of this period that we're in as we've heard of the, Ecocene and the various geologic periods of, the Earth's development, and it always has the Latin suffix "cene" on it, right? Well, many people have said we're in the Anthropocene, which means the era of man influencing the environment. But there are some critical thinkers that are saying we're in the area, we should be calling this the Plantationocene, which means that we have taken a plantation model, which is monocultural, monocropping,
Mm-hmm.
mass producing it, and eliminating all the other species
Mm-hmm.
for the economic simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's been from rubber tapping and rubber forest to Weyerhaeuser and the forestry practices in North America, to what we've done to the rainforest in the Amazon, or what the American West used to look like before, BLM land and the cow all over, the American West, or whether the biodiversity of the American prairie was one of the most intense biodiverse areas in the world. You had 10
in the Midwest.
Yeah, in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Now you have soy and corn, or corn and soy, or soy and soy, and corn on either side of the highway. It's just, it's this reduction of biodiversity. It's such a severe loss to humanity and the planet, because we don't know what we will need in the future. Yes. So all of these things go into what I would call the ethos of, plant-based eating. And it shows like yours, I don't get often enough chance to really explore these ideas. So thank you for bringing up the whole topic.
No, I'm thrilled that you bring this up. You've expanded on this. I just want to paraphrase this for people because I want them to be able to take this away from this show. So not only getting animals out of the supply chain, but the monocrop that we've been doing. So really briefly, we need trees. They create oxygen and they pull carbon from the air, but we cut down these trees so that we can plant soy, corn, wheat, I guess, as well. And then do we feed those high fiber protein things, grains, to people? No, we feed them to animals. And then animals take a long time. They take a lot of water. They take a lot of land. Oh, have they produced any meat yet? No, because they've got, another 10 months, as they should, because they're living beings. So you have to keep feeding them these grains. So you have to cut down more trees. So you're losing this biodiversity. This is very overly simplified, obviously. You're losing this biodiversity. If you were just to feed people the whole grains with protein and fiber, you could cut down much fewer trees. You could keep much more diversity. You wouldn't have to be taking down things in Brazil, for example, the Amazon and palms, et cetera. So it's an ecological problem with a distinct solution. This is why I call on large corporations again to not waste resources or time and start switching over. Obviously not something you do in one day, but to start thinking about switching over in the long run. It is better economically as well, because we're not going to get more land and we're not going to get more water as we go from 7 billion to 10 billion people on the planet. So you're going to have to feed them somehow, and you can't keep cutting down trees because we've run out of those as well.
Well, yeah, and I think it's the encouragement to bigger food runs to a deeper challenge, because I think part of what we have to do in providing solutions that are practical. So, how can we create visionary solutions based on achievable results? And that's where kind of pragmatic visionary thinking is what we needed, and we have to be bold enough to look for these whole different system solutions. And what I wanted to say is today's food system, where plant-based is a small part of, the total eating practices of the mass modern culture, has been built around a industrial age ethos of distributing calories very cheaply.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, before the full advent of the age of computers and the miniaturization of small engines so that even routine farming could be mechanized, people needed calories to do physical work all over the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So efficiently feeding that population, which was doing manual labor, was the primary job of the designers of that food system. And they were also trying to get rid of different military industrial products like ammonia fertilizer, which was a byproduct of the production of munitions.
Mm-hmm.
So, the industrial age had its own symbiosis of how these different products could be used and formed to make very profitable enterprises, right? But for designing for the planet and the people, which is what our job is today, we have to look at that total system and we say, now our job is to deliver affordable nutrients that are much more complex. And for Califia, that's meant that we have ventured our latest product. I thought you held it up, but I just want to point it out because it's brand new, is the protein oat product, which has omegas, protein, vitamins, calcium, all in a plant-based product. And, I mentioned this product with a lot of humility as well, because frankly, it's been too long coming that the plant-based manufacturing community has been supplying superior solutions to dairy from a macronutritional standpoint. It took us a long time to get this right, to prioritize it, so that actually, if let's just say a young mother wanted to serve their child to make sure they have protein all day long, they could give them a glass of milk and make sure they have protein. Whereas, a cup of soy milk wasn't going to do that. It wasn't going to give them the full protein value. Now, our technology has advanced enough that it can be delicious, creamy, easy to drink. Kids will love it. And it has all that basic macronutrition. So, yeah.
So again, you're speaking to the creativity, the challenges that you have accepted and perhaps surpassed, I'll say, in giving nutrients now at an affordable price and a convenient buying pattern, et cetera, accessibility to people as our needs have shifted. I guess I should probably say, I don't want to throw our food system under the bus for what it was.
Right.
It just doesn't serve us now today. And today, as we go forward, we look for leaders and we look for companies that are nimble enough, that are smart enough, that are long vision oriented to address the needs today. And that's accessible, affordable nutrients, as you say, and no longer monocropping and destroying of the environment and clearly taking animals out of the food supply chain. It is not 1900. Let's switch that up. But I want to add to this, those aren't the only things that are changing. And can I say that I'm proud of you? Am I allowed to say that? So proud of all that you've done, and thank you for doing it. But you've also been a leader in how you treat and work with your employees. So another thing that has come out of COVID is that people are looking how slaughterhouse workers are treated, and they're horrified, as they should be. Perhaps they should even be more horrified than what they were, in my opinion. But you have established Califia as a partnership with a farm cooperative. Perhaps you could tell me about that. And at the same time, perhaps answer for me if you think it's a selling point for companies in the future as to how they treat their employees.
Yeah, first of all, it's a super challenge. And, you can't expect large food companies to suddenly become worker owned and so on. But
fair enough.
One of the things when I think as most of your listeners know, my history, I came from starting a company 40 years ago called Odwalla, and we were making fresh squeezed juices. And at that time, we thought that was the epitome of good health. And largely because when you really did produce it raw and fresh, you had all those enzymes, and it was really something special from a quality and a nutritional standpoint. But and Coke ended up owning Odwalla at one point, and I noticed that they doubled and in many cases tripled the amount of calories that the original products had. And sorry to say that they also looked around and said, what happened? Like, why did we lose our
business,
loyal consumers? So I think that question should have been asked earlier and a little deeper myself. But I do think that in a positive sense, the consumer has shifted its attention to how it's going to get these nutrients and how each food choice matters more. So, though, bringing in these smarter ways to make our rituals of, whether it's our daily coffee or, our bowl of cereal, and make them, much more complete foods, much more complex foods, better for the digestion, introducing probiotics, becoming aware that we're actually symbiotic with our microbiome, our digestive system is a community of its own that we have to take good care of. So all of these things converging around, the practice of using a plant-based system as your true North Star. That's kind of what my hope is, the bigger leaders of food companies start to see. Yeah, just like the parallel in the investment community that supported the Beyond Meat IPO was that they called them ESG, environmental,
social governance. Yeah.
Social governance. And those companies and funds have shifted their mandates towards finding places where those dollars can be put to work in a holistic way. Why? Largely because many of them, the controllers, have children,
yes,
and daughters in particular, if I might say, who have stimulated and touched their conscience and moved their parents towards wiser planetary investment strategies.
Yeah, never underestimate the power of a female teen. It's quite a force to be reckoned with. So again, kind of summing up what you've said, because you've said so much and I want people to be able to take home this information. Can you think of any time in history when there has been one solution to so many problems? I mean, here you're talking about aligning our food supply so that we don't deplete the earth of its own nutrients. At the same time, we double up, triple up, make sure that we have the nutrients we need at a more accessible and inexpensive way, while making sure that the planet remains biodiverse from a plant standpoint and also an animal standpoint. I mean, one solution, folks, and it does it all. I
am so passionate about this concept because I don't think it can be expressed emphatically enough. That, first of all, each of us as humans on the planet with agency, meaning we have power in ourselves. Yes. We have, if you live in California, you know the phrase self-love and all that, but you don't have to glorify the aspect. It is just common sense and self-esteem, but it's also a feminine principle of protectiveness and precautionary principle that we're looking out for the planet as our own. And I think that this calculation of empowered consumer choices, even going beyond the word consumer, it's not, consuming is the wrong idea. I use it, but I keep struggling for the right ring of a phrase that sounds naturalistic, but I keep coming back to human beings. Let's just call ourselves human beings making human choices, right? Okay, when you choose, just to break it down by the numbers, when you choose to drink a glass of plant-based milk, like Califia,
right here, by the way,
instead of a dairy animal-based choice, right? And any kind of animal that it would come from, you are saving roughly a pound of carbon per pint. So one glass, 16-ounce glass, is a pound of carbon saved from going into the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide. We consume, on average, as human beings, between 2,000 to 4,000 pounds of food per capita, right?
Wow.
Per year.
Per year.
If you're African, it's going to be under 2,000 pounds. And if you're a obese American, you're probably north of 4,000 pounds, right? If you shift to plant-based, 100% in your diet, you become a vegan, you will save a ton, 2,000 pounds of carbon per year. So that single act in a planetary sense is more impactful than buying an electric car, shifting over your house to solar, doing all these other things that have a bunch of ambiguous impacts anyway that we haven't really unpacked relative to rare earth minerals, conflict countries, and there's a bunch of stuff to unpack there, right? So sometimes we don't even know if those choices truly make sense yet or not, right? So what I'm saying is switch to a plant-based diet primarily, not out of religion, but just out of common sense choice for your children in the world we want to create. And we will have made a significant move. We would eliminate more than 20% of all the environmental impact that's causing the greenhouse gas effect and the carbon. Yeah.
Yes, and let's just not forget that it would be very disruptive to your life and your wallet if you had to go out and buy a new electric car. The same would be true if you had to put on solar panels right now. But we're just talking about eating. We're talking about the thing you love to do 3 times a day. You vote with your wallet for the planet and your health 3 times a day. Just make that teeny switch. It's already there. Plant-based milk is right next to the regular milk. Make that teeny switch, grab the plant-based milk. Boom, you're talking about a healthier planet and a healthier waistline. So, it's right there for you. You don't have to go out and buy a new car. Just buy the milk you were going to buy anyway, but put it towards plant-based. I mean, it's all there for you. That's the beauty of this.
Well, in reality, I mean, I don't want to make it all self-serving because I think everything is complex, right? It is there's all of us need to make choices throughout our lives, but by making a successful choice in one area, it makes the person internally feel empowered to go, okay, I covered that, I did that. Just like if you had found finally a great tasting plant-based milk, now you can go to butter. Oh, wow, I can solve my problem with butter. Oh, I love bagels, but I was getting fat. It was like too much to always have the schmear. Oh, now I can find a plant-based one with the cream cheese that tastes even better, right? So you can have your cake and eat it too with a plant.
I love this. I'll also say that, this is a lot of fun. So again, if you ever feel like, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart, this is an area where you can take back control and feel great about your choices and feel informed, maybe start feeling healthier, and also not feel that large external entities to your life are deciding your future, be it large corporations or large government organizations. That never feels good when you feel like they're pulling the strings of your life. You want to start pulling your own strings. And so this is very empowering. I do want to, and I completely agree with you. This interview is not here to be self-serving for you. It's just that you have been a leader in so many ways that I do want to highlight all the things that you do that are so great. This plant-based butter is made from cashews and tiger nuts and has no palm oil. So that was a big seller for me, and super, super delicious. I do have to say that. So go find yourself some. Can people get it across the U.S. or just on the West Coast right now?
They can get it across the U.S. at Whole Foods, and it's about to appear in selected Targets in the fall and in Kroger in the fall as well, and also at Sprouts.
Also at Sprouts. Okay, so you guys know your marching orders there. If we're running out of time, this kills me. Just quickly, if we could get to that one question we sort of started with, and then we got off on a tangent because there is so much to talk about here. But I interviewed Michelle Simon from the Plant-Based Food Association, and she said that she really felt plant-based businesses weren't doing enough to promote to the world that they, in fact, have a very different policy for how they treat their employees than, let's say, a slaughterhouse might. Yeah. And I wondered, you have a long history of working with your employees and your farm cooperative, and I wondered if you could weigh in on that at all.
Yeah, first of all, when I got into the business, part of the reason Califia was formed is that there was a farming cooperative called Sun Pacific Group in the Central Valley, which is one of the largest growing regions in the world. And they're very sophisticated, large farmers. And I felt, if I could be an influence on them towards going organic or trying to develop and see the potential of serving that movement, that would be effective place for a person at my life stage to apply their efforts. And I felt bridges had to be built between the radical environmental community, which I came out of. I was the first environmental science major at Stanford. There wasn't even a department. We were making things up in those days, So that to bring that awareness and sense of potential, which is kind of how American business people think. They have to see opportunity. They don't like being told about limits. Personally, I think limits are useful to understand, and they can be creative drivers, as we already spoke about. But anyway, my thought process was partner with these farmers, let them see the potential, and help solve problems for them. So the first problem they gave me was, look, we have these incredible varieties of easy peeling tangerines called cuties, which many of your listeners may know of, but they're so fragile that cosmetically, many of them don't qualify to be shipped around. So we're throwing away more than 20%. So we have this big food waste problem.
Yeah.
We need somebody to think out of the box and come and fix that for us. So, figured out how to apply a bunch of TLC to these little tiny cuties. We were able to turn them into, products. And my dream was reward the farmers more because they're the ones who are doing the hardest part of the work. So by including them in the ownership of the company and, the benefits of all that branding that usually only the financiers and the Wall Street, organizations reap those big rewards, or farm co-ops themselves aren't that in touch with the consumer. So they're so far away with it, it's hard for them to be on trend and, figure out all the CPG mastery that many of those, types of businesses have. So that was the original impulse. Treating employees well is part of an integral strategy that I think any natural foods type company needs to have. Califia is certainly not perfect. We're also entrepreneurial, which means a person like me is always trying to drive something further. And if you're doing that, the status quo is not really a comfortable place in a meeting. So, we're always trying to ask the question behind the question, and what can we do better? How can we eliminate plastic? And all that, solving those problems takes work. So workloads at entrepreneurial companies, I find, are actually higher. So stresses come with it too. So I don't ever want to portray it as the dream, everybody wants. You have to make these choices, but you also have to work for them.
Yes, there's no way around being a scrappy entrepreneur. That's usually what gets things moving. So I understand that. Let's switch a little bit over because I'm sorry we're not going to have so much time, and I do want to talk more about what we've got going on here. Do you ever get the question or the pushback? okay, but there's lots of oils in things, even in plant-based milks. Do you ever get that question about the health issues with oils?
Well, yeah, so no doubt there, and we go out of our way, and it's a pet peeve of mine that many companies choose canola oil or palm oil as a primary and easy way out. It's just like putting sugar. Sugar is a big solve. Why? Because it's cheap. It creates an artificial mouthfeel, and it stimulates this, sort of condition that we all have that's addictive. Well, for those of us that have evolved out of a heavy sugar diet, you realize that once you've done that, your body does recalibrate. You don't need it anymore. And the food system could do that. It could take the leadership. And Califia, in fact, even the low levels that we started with, we've reduced it by 50% over the last 5 years. So that is, by self-challenging. That's,
back to the entrepreneurial push
stuff hard, and as some of your listeners have pointed out, plant-based milks at this point are, only about 14% of the dairy milk volume. So we have a long way to go. We have a long way, and we have a lot of capacity building to build. So we need people. We need people who want to work hard, aren't afraid of challenges, and embrace, the joy of having something really good to do with your life and for future generations. And I think that's, as far as employee culture, probably the most important binder for tackling the harder work, So I find my job many times is to share that and share that passion and encouragement with the team. And COVID has been hard because we don't have our togetherness anymore. So we're just like we're doing is how our company has to relate every day across the screen. So anyway, I just think holistic company cultures are part of providing holistic solutions to the environment. So you're really right to bring it up. Super important point. And I think just by making it a priority and a conversation and bringing, diversity and inclusion as a core value, not just an add-on in a performative way, is very important for all the companies in our community to do as well.
Yes, and I just want to riff off of something that you said about this passion, and that's what binds a lot of your company culture. I had Seth Tibbett, founder of Tofurkey, on this show, and he said, it's that passion that is really the superhero power for vegans, because they're so passionate that they're just not going to leave any stone unturned because they want a solution so badly. You had talked about plant-based milks only being 14%. We discussed in the beginning, and we touched on this, but so briefly because we were talking about so many things. Maybe we can go back to it. Where do you see specifically plant-based milks going in, let's say, the next 10 years? What are your predictions there?
I think it's headed to 50% easily. And I think you need to look no further than a progressive retailer like Target. So not even Whole Foods, but Target. The primary shopper at Target is a Hispanic Latino. They are very concerned about their health. The Target index of the percentage of what might be called specialty milks is more than 50%. So that does include organic milk.
Okay.
So it's not just plant-based. So it's plant-based, organic, specialty. But it is not conventional milk. And that has already gone past 50%. And, the rate of growth of plant milk compared to organic milk is much steeper now. So the curves are going to intersect, and we are going to pass the 50% mark. And I'll put my money down on the 10-year mark, less than. And but this is, when you think about capacity building, it's why companies like Califia, Oatly, Ripple, many of the smaller progressive companies that are trying hard really are up against a big challenge, because we have simultaneously to fight legislative and government investment biases that favor these older industries, and we have to do all the education with the consumer. So thanks to shows like yours, there's extra ways to spread the word, but we do need everybody on deck to win.
And is that one of the biggest challenges that you've seen? Or I guess that challenge maybe is something that you could have foreseen as well. I'm wondering what some of the biggest challenges are that maybe you didn't foresee, and what's the toughest thing on your plate now?
Well, we didn't quite see how reactionary the dairy industry would be. Can't use the word milk, can't use the word butter, can't, just trying to do that. I thought they would embrace it earlier and have their own versions, and you have to give companies like Danone a lot of credit, because even though the tail isn't going to wag the dog, they're not going to be the champion for a plant-based world, but they were wise enough to know that they should include some of it and grow with it, right? So I think that the unforeseen challenge for me was certainly COVID too. It's like, who saw that? I mean, we saw the potential of vectors coming from, as you pointed out, all these animal practices throughout the world. And we shouldn't racialize it to China and stuff, because there's wet markets are all over the place,
including the US.
Yeah. Right. And there's demand for exoticism in animals as a food source all over the place. So I just think compassion is where the universality is. Mm-hmm. And I think, not expecting it from others, but demonstrating it yourself. And by those practices, we will create a contagious movement that the world wants to be behind. So that's my encouragement.
I think we're seeing that. I do. I think we are seeing the beginning of it. And I think particularly plant-based milks, have a lot of tailwind. I think COVID's giving you some, lactose intolerance is giving you some, China's starting to shift, giving you some, although they were never really dairy-based there. Right. But, companies like Coca-Cola have been trying to introduce dairy into China. That's another show, but okay. And I just want to be respectful of your time, because I know we are short. So I'm sorry if some of these seem like quick questions that I'm trying to just sneak in here. But the truth is, I'm just trying to sneak them in here before I lose you, because I don't know when I'll get you again. You have Plant-Based World Milk Day coming up. What are you doing for that?
Well, a big thing that's happened, again, as a result of COVID, is a shift to digital communications. So we are... And then Califia is a creative company. So we try to look for ways to communicate in a fun and engaging way on these digital platforms. So a lot of what we're doing is shifting to animation as a communication style. So we're creating these animations around our latest product launches and featuring them, as part of a much bigger campaign around those make it not just a day, but a week or a month, and try to get the awareness out there. So I think that the other thing that we're looking to do is collaborate with the retailers to get the retailers to realize this is really an extra way to demonstrate, especially to their younger and more aware consumers, that they understand how important this is to them. So, retailer engagement, digital, creative, and showcasing the latest, what we think is most beneficial types of products. Those are the things we're doing.
I think that you bring up an interesting point. If I were a retailer right now, I would be very worried, because so many companies have had to be nimble, just like Califia, and go direct to consumer. And I think it's a very tricky place for a grocery store right now that doesn't have that much real estate. And I think they'd be wanting to do things that are very much engaging of the consumer. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and smart there for you guys. What do you wish you knew 10 years ago that you know now?
Ooh, I think the biggest lesson I've learned that's shareable is that I think that trusting and believing in yourself and your own sense of truth and justice and what the sense of what could be, is so important for entrepreneurs and activists. If we don't do that, we always come up with these things that we think we have to be performative in, instead of being, really an expressor of what we feel inside, which is that's the only thing. Having gone through a liver transplant, I'm a person that survived a near-death experience, and I can testify to the fact that when that happens to you, you are not thinking about your bank account, your status in the world. You are thinking about, did I leave, or am I leaving something better than, when I got here? And I really think about the meaning of all this as much more the flow of goodness. Like, can each of us increase the flow of goodness and have that be, spread and create its own multiplier effect? So it's not so much and I got to that by the hard lessons of not being true to myself and really not saying how I really felt in the face of environments or meetings where that was not popular to fully express what the vision was. So I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
That is what you're looking for, Elizabeth, but
it does. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. So I'm not saying that you are saying this. I'm just speaking for myself. It is so incredibly painful to not be authentic. And it is such a huge joy to speak your truth. So for anybody who might be wrestling with those two at odds, go towards joy. I'll just say that. Okay, two more quick questions, because I know how very pressed for time you are. When was the moment, if you can remember, that you decided, I'm going vegan and I'm never going back?
Well, to be very honest, I'm not 100% vegan yet.
So, you are? You're still work in progress. Look at that.
I'm work in progress, largely because I have been, during COVID has allowed me to be at home and be a vegan. But in the work world that I was in before, constant plane flights and all this, I found it very difficult with my metabolism, protein needs, and and being a post-transplant patient, the amount of protein I need for my own recovery has been very hard to find in a travel-based environment. Mm-hmm. And, it's not an excuse if someone was saying, well, are you, a believer or not? It's just that in truth, it was very hard for me. And one of the reasons I think Califia, as product development is I've pushed it hard is because I want all these substitutes in my life. I want them available everywhere. And, and by making them just that much little bit better, is the way to win for it, because I think it brings over so many more conversions rather than just having what's called a substitute, So
this product is really for you then. You put the protein into the oat milk. This is for you.
Yes. And I also didn't like doctors always prescribing post-weaning babies on the dairy immediately. They can go, after they're done being on infant formula, go right onto a product like that, which is great.
Yeah. And I'll just, which is so smart. Babies going over to cow's milk makes no sense because they're not baby cows, folks, just FYI. But I just want to, fun thing about this product is you have a zip off. So you pull this little tab, and right. I'm not going to do it. I pull this little tab and the plastic comes off so that you can recycle this. So right. much creativity going into the products. My very last question for you is, if you are having a bad day, and during COVID, sometimes people have had quite a few, is there a phrase that you say to yourself to get yourself back in the game?
Oh, actually, you guys did warn me, and I
about this one.
Yeah, I didn't do the homework because I really examined myself, and I said, do I say a phrase? But I think about the moment that happened to me, when my liver failed. And, it was, this sort of choice point between struggling to stay alive and choosing to be here on the planet versus sort of, going ahead and, I don't want to say take the easy way out, but leaving early, right? And that choice point boiled down to loving people and not wanting to miss out on being able to help some more, and just the joy of being together. So I don't know. I kind of tell myself I don't want to let any of my loved ones down. So get up and tie your shoes and get back to work.
And get back in the game. I love this. We're going to leave everybody with sustainable, creative business practices and love. Greg Steltenpohl, CEO and co-founder of Califia Farms. I am so happy that you are here with me. I'm so grateful for all that you do. You don't go away. You sit tight. You stay here. Everybody else, thank you for being with me on the Plant-Based Business Hour. I will see you all next Tuesday. I love you all. Thank you for being vegan with me so that together we can take back our health and the health of the planet. Greg, stay put. Bye, everybody.